Dear FMX community, welcome to the third show of Highlights of FMX 1994 to 2020. With this live program, Film Akademie's Animationsinstitut wants to bridge the time until we can all meet again in person by presenting outstanding speakers from the history of FMX to you. My name is Andreas Hykade. I'm the director of Film Akademie's Animationsinstitut, conference chair of FMX, and your host for this show. We're happy you're all joining us today. We turned off your microphones to avoid background noise, but the ones who are with us in the interactive room, they can use the chat function on the lower right side of the screen to ask questions, and we'll do our best to pass them on to our speaker. So, we are especially happy that Regina Pessoa is with us today. Regina Pessoa is one of the true and individual voices in the field of independent animation. Her films, The Night, Tragic Story with a Happy Ending, Kali, the Little Vampire, and Uncle Thomas, Accounting for the Days, all became cornerstone films. So one can definitely say that the work of Regina Pessoa makes the history of animation more rich and more beautiful. She is also a member of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome here at the Highlights of FMX, Regina Pessoa.
Hello. Nice to see you all.
Hello, Regina. Let me start with a simple yet important question, which is, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well. I'm happy to be here.
And where are you? Where is here? Where do you live? Can you tell us a little bit, where do you live?
Actually, I'm at my studio. It's my normal working place. And I'm in Portugal, in the countryside near Porto, the city of Porto. I live in a big property, so I have my studio here. There are many houses, and we have also a museum of moving image here in the property. So it's a quite complete place to be.
Can you tell us a little bit about this Museum of Moving Images? What does it show, and what's the audience? Who comes to visit?
Mostly the attendance is schools, because here in Portugal we have what we call the National Cinema Plan. It's a kind of parallel to the plan that language like Portuguese or English, they have a certain list of books that they have to read with the children. So in parallel with that, in Portugal, we have also, or schools can apply for this plan to watch films and analyze films with the children and the students. So mostly we have visits from schools which students are analyzing films, and they can kind of decode what the background of moving image, how can we see moving image. And this was the main philosophy why we started this museum. Abi, my partner and my producer, he always defended that, especially today, we are drowned by images. All the kids are watching images all day, and they don't know how it works. So it's necessary, it's important, an education to explain to the people how, just the fact how we place a camera, it's never innocent. If we place the camera in a certain angle, we can manipulate people and people's opinions. So this museum, it's connected with this learning of the language of the moving image, how we see two images moving, or we have the impression, the illusion that we are seeing movement, and also to decode the language, the film language, in order to understand better the images that we see every day. So it's mostly schools that we receive, and they explain this path of evolution of moving image, and with examples of animation as well.
Regina, we prepared a little film about you, so our audience can know you better. And so we want to show this film, and we take this film to kick off our conversation. So here is Spotlight on Regina Pessoa.
I got used, even I don't like to be, I got used to be slow. Not because I like to be slow, but because the kind of pictures I do demand a lot of work. So my average in production is 2 years, 2.5 years. I would love to be optimistic for the next project and do it quicker, but I expect the same 2 years. Normally I start with the pictures. I write down the story with a storyboard. I don't write previously a script. Maybe because my background is not from cinema. I study painting, so I always attached to the pictures before the writing. And I like to push it as further as I can. It's the way I like to work. So my storyboard is very detailed in action and also in details in image. And if we see one of my movies, the film respects very straightly the storyboard. I'm starting a new project. I'm in the preparation, developing the storyboard, the visuals, the story. And again, it will be a short film. This time I based my story in a person that I met, that it was important for me. So I'm developing this story about my uncle Thomas. Basically what I want to say, he was not an important person for other people. He was not a very active member of the society, but he was very good for me. It was him who taught me to draw. Normally I have a small team of 2 people working with me. For instance, for my last film, Kali, the Little Vampire, I had 2 animators for the outline animation, just the outline. And then for final visuals, another 2 animators. I cannot have more than that, but it's nice to have help for my films. I remember always how I started and how lost I was and what helped me at that time. It was not to follow what I thought it was the mainstream, but what helped me was to find something from me that I could share with the others. And when I discovered this, it was so important for me, so I can talk about little things that are important to me. I can make my animations, my visuals on these things, and this is also possible. So it's what I try to show to the students. Sometimes the student arrives and they tell me your idea, and sometimes it's a bit strange at the first approach, but it's his idea, and my job is to try to understand where he wants to go. And of course, if he's a bit lost, try to guide him, but in the direction that he wants to go. I cannot impose a direction. I try to teach them, or maybe communicate them, that even if in mainstream work, even if they work in a big studio, but if in developing a scene or a film, they give something from them. Oh, like this scene remind me a smell from when I was little, and I remember how it was. So we can feel better the scene if we put something of our experience in the work we do. I firmly believe that the work becomes better, and that's a bit what I try to pass to the students. A good story for me is the one that we can believe, and to believe in a good story we have to feel it, and to feel it we have to live it. So nothing better than talk about something that we know deeply.
Regina, we'd like to elaborate on your artistic path in this conversation. And we want to start from the very beginning. So my first questions would be, can you tell us where did you grow up and how was your childhood?
Well, I grew up in Portugal just after the revolution. So a country coming out of a long dictatorship. But I was somehow the first result of this new democracy. And my entire career is the result of this investment from this new democracy in public education, culture, and healthcare. So it's a kind of like my films, lights in the shadow, or lights coming from the shadows. My childhood was, in personal terms, was quite dark. Result of, I think, this period of history in Portugal. It was not only my family. A lot of the majority of families in the countryside were having troubles and lived not an easy life. So my family was also like that. I had a quite dark childhood, but pointed by some bright moments that I try to show also in my films. So basically, this was my childhood in the countryside in rural Portugal.
Can you tell us when you first got in contact with film? Do you still remember the first film you ever saw?
Actually, I never had a TV set at home. I never had much contact with the moving image, but the first film I watched in a public theater, my village was small, but it had a theater. I was little, I was 4 years old, and this young man appeared in the village and offered to all the people. He came with a old car and a projector and installed himself in this theater, and he offered Chaplin films, projected Chaplin films to the people in the village. And I went with my sister. And I remember I enjoyed so much the film. And I still remember the images are so vivid in my head. The house bouncing and Chaplin eating the boots, these dark black and white boots. And he was eating with such relish that I was kicking my sister and saying, "It must be chocolate." The funny thing about this story is that it doesn't end here. So, well, my life evolved. Later, when I was 17, I went to Porto to work and study art. And I started my career. And many years later, I was in France making my film Tragic Story with Happy Ending. And I used to call Abi every day. He was here in Portugal. And one day I was calling him, and he was very moved, very touched. And I asked him, what is happening? And he said, "Oh, you don't know what happened to me. I was attending this festival, this animation festival. So I was having dinner in a restaurant with Antonio Lojaneves, which was an important cinema critic in Portugal for one of the main newspapers. I was dining with him, and we were chatting and talking about which one of us was doing just after the revolution in 74. And it started telling me that he was like moved by this democratic movement, and he started showing films around the country. And he was showing Chaplin films. And then I said, "Chaplin films in the countryside in Portugal? Regina always tell me this story when she was 4. And the first film she saw was Chaplin's The Gold Rush." And then this man, this critic, asked David, "But where is Regina village? In which region?" And David told, "Oh, it's this village in this region." And the man said, "Oh my God, it was me." So it's a very round story because, and it's, for me, it touched me because we never know, like I'm here, I'm talking, and probably I will mention some films, but it moves me that this man just generously offered something, a cultural content to the people without expecting nothing in the return, but somehow it touched my probably my artistic skills, and somehow this, I think, is my favorite film from all times. And
It's still your favorite film. You just said you decided to study art at the age of 17, I think you said, but before that, what was your first contact with art, and what was the art that inspired you to follow this path yourself?
Well, I always enjoyed to draw, and as we just saw in the piece you showed, the little editing, the movie, I start drawing in a very curious way. As I said, I didn't have access to contents like I didn't have a TV set. I didn't used to go often to see films, but I have to do something to pass my time. And one of the things that I used to do was to draw. In a very unusual way as well, because I started drawing with my Uncle Thomas, the old uncle, bachelor. We didn't have a family, any kids, and he didn't have a regular job. So he had time for us, his nephews, and he was very kind with us. So it was with him that I started drawing, and it was large-scale drawings with charcoal from the fireplace on the walls of his house. So it was a kind of paradox situation, because we were doing a forbidden thing. Nobody was allowed in other houses to draw on the wall, but in Uncle Thomas' house we were allowed to draw on the walls. So it was this forbidden situation, but he was very serious with the drawing, because he was always telling us, pay attention to the proportions of the head, attention to the eyes. They have to be at a certain level, and be careful where you draw the nose. So it was how I started drawing. And it was always what I wanted to do. So when I had to choose what to follow for college, I follow art.
And which sort of art did you study? And what did you do before you did do animation? Did you do paintings? Was it
Well,
comic?
I never studied animation actually, and I was studying painting. It was my studies. It was what I wanted to learn and to study. But painting studies are quite expensive. So I was always looking for part-time jobs. I had a scholarship, but it was not enough. And I met these people, and they told me about a small animation studio. And they were looking for people to work there. And so, oh, come, Regina, show your drawings in our studio. And I was, oh, animation, I'm not really interested because I have this notion that animation is for kids, it's cartoons, it's this content that I was not really especially interested. But it was a job, and I went to the studio. And I showed my drawings to Abi, that became my partner and my producer. And he said, okay, you start tomorrow. And I never left. And what attracted me in animation, it was this side of animation that I didn't knew before, the independent animation. So I was very surprised to meet this kind of films that are very unknown to the general public. And I was fascinated because it was like the rich visuals, the textures that I was developing in art school, in my studies in painting, that I enjoyed so much to develop. It was what I really enjoyed. It was like to add another dimension to these visuals, because there was motion, there was storytelling, there was sound, there was film language. And I was really surprised and amazed with this possibility. And the first films, then, of course, I didn't knew anything about animation. And Dabi is a very generous person. Every person that arrived to the studio, he start like training this person and educating this new person. So of course he start like giving sessions showing films that it was important to watch, which were for instance Caroline Leaves films, Schwankmeyer's, and all this new dimension of moving image really attracted me, and finally it's what I follow and what I'm doing today.
Yes, and then you started to do your films. Your debut, The Night, you finished it in 1999, I think.
Yes,
it's a nightmarish film. So what was the inspiration to do this film?
Well, as I told, I started working in this studio. At the beginning, I didn't knew anything about animation. I didn't knew even what was a peg bar, so I learned there. And first, I worked in Abyss films for like 2 years. And then I'll start encouraging the young people, the young ones that start working in the studio, to start thinking about our own projects and films and possibilities. And all this was very exciting, the possibility about making our own film. But then when I started trying to put something on paper, it was a disgrace, because nothing good was coming out. It was really rubbish, and I had no notions about script writing, and very few about film language. So I was totally lost, and trying to follow more and more the notions I had about script writing and introduction, development, turning point, blah, blah, blah. And more I tried, more stuck I was. And then Abby saw all of us lost like that and just said, stop, stop, don't do that. Think just about something, a situation, an image, something that is important for you or meaningful for you, or that can help you to create strong images. Because if you do that, you will show your involvement with in the images you create. And somehow the viewer will watch those images, will feel that strength, that how deep it is for you. So that's what he said click in my head. And I said, something strong for me that can create nice images. I remembered when I was little, I was afraid of the dark. So I picked that very simple idea, very basic, very common, not original. It was humble enough for me to dare to approach the first steps of creating something. And I was avoiding also I was not able to write stories like that, fantastic stories from nothing. So I was avoiding difficulty. And finally, I think I found a solution for me, talking about something that I know. I was able to create original images, my own images. So I pick inspiration for my first film from my own childhood.
And what's special about the night? You already developed your signature style with it. Was there any forefathers that you could build this knowledge upon? What was the inspiration to craft that style?
Well, as I said, I picked a humble subject, being afraid of the dark, but I had at that time personal high challenge ambitions. I mean, I just had met the world of independent animation, and I was educating myself, and I had watched films like Caroline Leaf, and especially a film from Piotr Dumala, the Polish director, Kafka. It was a while after I watched this film, and I was impressed by the visuals of Piotr's films and by the movements of Caroline's films. So my goal was to understand how to create these camera movements from Caroline Leaf that are not realistic, but they are magical because a background transforms in another one, like in a very kind of morphing, magical way. And I was fascinated. I wanted to learn how to do that. And for the visuals, I was impressed by this process of engraving on plaster, which I didn't knew how Piotr worked at that time. So I made my own research in my corner, and I developed a technique to be able to animate on plaster, engraving on plaster under the camera. And of course, I planned some complicated camera movements. And it was a kind of my learning process. As I didn't had studied animation, I kind of established a training plan for me. I want to learn how to do that. So I did it in my film. So it was, at one point, it was very frightening because when I started the film, I could not go back. And of course, there were great moments of regret in the middle. Oh my God, why I started this crazy technique, making a film on my own under the camera, engraved on plaster plates. But I started and I had to finish, and I managed, and it was the beginning of my learning process. And another thing that I watching other people's films, I realized how important it is to create our own style. And of course, we have to try many things to be comfortable, to understand where we feel comfortable with each style, with each technique, with each visual. So it was important to work before in Abi's films, because he uses many different techniques and approaches, to start understanding where I do feel comfortable. So then in this film, The Night, I could start creating my own signature, and I could use the techniques where I was feeling more comfortable, and also the visuals. And it, of course, it was very important to determine my personal style.
Perhaps to give the audience a chance to understand what you're talking about and to get them close to your work, we'd like to show the film, The Night, your debut film that you did about more than 20 years ago. So, ladies and gentlemen, here is The Night by Regina Pessoa.
A lua nasceu e desceu lá do além, hino de paz e amor. Anjo meu, faz porque velo por ti, só aos anjos a lua sorri. Anjo meu, faz porque velo por ti, só aos anjos a lua sorri.
Very nice. How is it for you, Regina, to watch this film after so many years?
Well, I have another dimension with my relation with this film, because the song that ends the film, it's my mom who sings that song. So of course this brings me back to another level of the relation with this film. It's like keeping her alive, and so it's always moving for me, and I'm glad I use this song in the film.
In 2005, you finished your film Tragic Story with Happy Ending, and it's about a girl with some sort of heart disease, I guess. What was the inspiration to do that film?
Actually, this is a funny interpretation. I never thought about the heart disease.
Okay.
Actually, the inspiration comes again from my mother. My mother had schizophrenia, and she was a different person in a small society. So this girl, which heart beats faster than other people's, it's a metaphor to someone different in a that has something different in even society. This was my departing point, a kind of metaphor. And then for the film, I had other sources of inspiration. At that time, I was fascinated by the South American magical realism, especially from one of the storybooks from Gabriel Garcia Marquez. So it helped me to also to develop the story, and by the poems of 3 songs. 2 songs from a Brazilian musician called Chico Buarque, which are Jenny and the Zeppelin and Construction, and another song from the poem from a song from a Portuguese singer. So this helped me a lot to create the story, this metaphor about someone being different in a small community.
And then the next film was Kali the Little Vampire. It's the first time I think a male main character, at least I guess Carly is male, but is again an outsider. So how come you elaborated on that story? And I think it's the first film where you added some color, a little bit of red into the black and white. So why did you make this decision?
The previous film we talked, Tragic Story with Happy Ending, was a very successful film for a short film. And of course, this it's very good. But then I was in a complicated situation because it was hard to at that time, and people were telling me it was hard to make it better. And also, I was in the 30s. I was approaching the late 30s in my age, and this is a very complicated age for a woman, because we are like the character approaching a zone where it's really like twilight between shadows and light. And this feeling of being in a kind of a middle world between light and shadow, between watching the youth dreams not achieved, going. It was too late to realize them. It was like I had to do. It made me think a lot about myself, about my work, about what to do. So I think this creature, it's half human, half animal. It's not really human, and doesn't have a gender either. It somehow it's how I felt at that time. And curiously, it looks like a male character, but the name is a feminine name, because Kali is the goddess, the Hindu goddess of darkness and death. But this goddess, she supposedly tells us that destruction and chaos and darkness, it's useful to create a new order. It's necessary to destroy to be able to create something new. So I think I pick all these elements because it was how I was feeling. And I created this character belonging to between shadows and light. And for me, after that things started to make sense, it was a kind of, I call it the third episode of a trilogy dedicated to childhood fears and difference. It was, I think, my way to say goodbye to the youth dreams and make peace with my childhood, and accepting darkness as a good thing. It's a new territory for new creations.
Carly, he seems to be full of contradictions as well. I mean, he looks like a child, but he's got the voice of an old man. So why to create a character where the contradiction seems to be part of his character?
I wanted, I'm always trying to learn, as I said. My films are my learning process, also in film language. And I'll always try to show or say things, not explicitly, but like composing. The film is a composition. I mean, using the voice old person, old man, but the character of a child or a youth. What I wanted to say is at the end, the character finally he found his place somewhere, and he lived, and he had a peaceful life, and he got some wisdom, because the old person voice always reveals a certain wisdom. So it was my way to tell that the character didn't die. He grew up and got old and achieved something.
What about the red?
The red, the red was necessary. Well, it was a vampire, supposedly a vampire. So of course, in the basic terms, the red was useful. But of course, the red always is symbolic. It's our inside is red. Our wounds are red, and this film talks also about this will to belong a place, to try to belong to a place that the character doesn't belong. It's not possible. So this is his wound, and the red was also related to this pain. And I suppose that if we, our deep feelings, some of them inside, our interior, if we open ourselves, is red. And I suppose that a lot of our deepest feelings are red as well. So it's also this in the film, our interior, our deep thoughts and feelings.
And then your next film, you already talked about Uncle Thomas accounting for the days. It's again a black and white film. It's again some red in it, but there's also little bits of yellow in it. So there seems to be like the light starts to crawl into your work film by film. Is this a conscious decision, or is it a coincidence?
It's both, I think. It was like that image, those images that I was creating, to be balanced, they needed something else. What is? Maybe if I was trying in my visual research, and then obviously I prefer monochromatic tones, but when I use color, like on Uncle Thomas, it is meaningful. For instance, you mentioned the yellow. The yellow was a warm moment. Of course, literally in the image is lighting a fire, but it was also meaning that those warm moments that I have with my uncle. For instance, when we start this conversation, you asked me about my childhood, and I told you that it was a dark childhood pointed by bright moments. And Uncle Thomas, for me, represents some of those bright moments, and this film shows some of these bright moments. And the color helps to underline those moments in my film. The red here, I always already thought about that. It has more than one meaning. As in the film, for people that don't know, my uncle not only teach me how to draw, but he was also a kind of outsider as well. I grew up with a lot of people with mental problems, but kind people. And he had a lot of manias, and one of his manias was an obsession with calculations and numbers. So I was fascinated by this mania that we used to do, pass his days making calculations and filling papers with numbers, but with a very beautiful handwriting, and each number was a drawing itself. And he used these colors, dark color for the main writing, and columns in red. So I picked the same red he used in his writing and his calculations. I wanted to use it as well to point some moments in the film. And of course, recently I came across a scholar paper from an author, and he talked about the meaning of red in Little Riding Hood, and it's the color of loss of innocence. And maybe in this film, Uncle Thomas, the red also means that to me a bit, because as the film evolves, I show these bright moments that I lived with my uncle, but I showed as well the problematic moments, the troubled moments. And somehow when I was a child, I understood that not only there were very dark feelings and very dark episodes in his life and in family life. So I think the red also can mean that kind of loss of innocence and in childhood.
Uncle Thomas was a co-production as well. I think like there was 3 countries: Portugal, Canada, and France. So why to do these co-productions, and do you think the film benefits from involving other countries and other expertises?
Totally. It's already the 3rd film I make in co-production with this same configuration: France, Canada, and Portugal. And I think for someone from a country like Portugal, where I live, it's essential to establish this co-production for several reasons. First, with all the budgets together, we can be more. I can be more ambitious in my artistic goals, and can achieve a piece that I'm pleased with, or at least go further in my artistic ambitions. This is probably one of the main reasons, of course, and the practical reasons, but there are other. Another reason is I do short films. I do animated shorts. It's what I like to do, and then what I intend to do. And the life of a short film is very short. It's the problem. So involving other countries, and especially countries like with a tradition, cultural tradition, like France, that has a real cultural policy, and a country with a background in animation like National Film Board of Canada. Having these countries is it's amazing, because I'm sure that my film will be defended in. It will multiply the possibilities of distribution of my film. The film will be distributed in 3 countries and will be defended strongly in these territories. So this is one big reason why I defend co-productions, is the possibilities to spread the word, to spread the film spectrum of life. And the 3rd reason is, I return always to this question, but I think it's important for each artist. I'm still learning. I'm still, as I said, each film is my learning process. I never studied film, and to have the possibility to work with teams, professionals from these countries, to can learn and understand and learn from their experience has been essential for me and for my artistic progress. So I will defend co-productions. I will try to do it again.
Let's move to the questions from the audience. There's Leonor, and she's asking, what's your opinion on the future of Portuguese animation? Where do you feel like it's going?
Well, I'm now the old generation of Portuguese animators, filmmakers, and the new generation. I think we are already almost in the third generation, because I started my films. And while I was already making films, the next generation could start studying animation, which was impossible before. So when I was already presenting my films, I could attend young people from Portugal showing their student films. So it was a new, the next step. And now this generation that were students, now they are professionals. And they are doing an amazing work. Especially here in Porto, there are different small studios, and they are developing an amazing, serious artistic work. Luckily, since the early 90s, the Portuguese Film Commission started funding short films and animation, and I hope I contributed to this, to give some credit to this field. They never stopped these fundings, and we hope it will continue. We hope this new crisis will not affect us. And this generation is doing very well. And so if, as I said, this new crisis don't damage too much, I'm very hopeful for the future of Portuguese animation. We don't have an industry. We are a too small country to have an industry, but we have a good good spots of artistic animation, which I think is very important as well for industry. I think what we do, independent animation, is a kind of important experimental laboratorium for the industry to renovate, refresh and renovate itself.
Okay, I think there's 3 more questions. Vasilis wants to know, would you ever think of making an animation feature?
Never. Never. It's not one of my goals. It's not one of my ambitions. I think what my visuals and the way I develop my stories and the format that fits to my language is the short film. I don't feel comfortable with the animated features. I don't feel comfortable to watch them. They talk a lot, and I don't feel comfortable with that. That film solutions is solved just by the dialogues. It's another language. It's another universe where I don't think I belong.
There's some guy named Jan Pinkava, and he's having a question. He says, hi, Regina. In the past, you have spoken about the loneliness of animating, the commitment, the concentration and focus, the slow personal journey. Has this become easier with experience, or does the artist have to suffer?
Well, I don't think the artist has to suffer, but I think animation is, it's a very painful job. I'm in my case, as I said before, I cannot. I work with Dabi, and Dabi always tries to, Regina, each image, you have to give up of each image. You have to see the whole thing, and it's in movement. But maybe by my background, studying painting and arts, I cannot stop being involved with each image. And in animation, this is a terrible trap. And it's one of the reasons why I'm slow on making animation, because I give the same importance and the same focus to every frame, to every drawing, to every image. With the time, I got used to this kind of reputation I have. I'm not happy with that, but I got used to. Well, it's what I am, and I suffer less with that. At the beginning, I felt very guilty. The difference now is I don't. I suffer less, so I think I got used to my process. I don't think the animator has to suffer, and I congratulate those that can do a amazing job very quickly. And I used to envy them, but not now. Like the character Kali, I got used to where I am.
There's one more question. They seem to not be able to accept your point of view to feature films. So Maria Giraldes, she asks, although you said you belong to short films, do you have a favorite feature film or one that inspired you?
In animation? No. No, I don't have. Maybe, as I said, talking with my colleagues, they always they knew all the. For instance, when we were kids, they knew all the Disney films and they knew the songs, and they used to sing them. For me, I never watched them, so I think it was something that I lost. It was one of these childhood dreams that I couldn't realize, and now it's too late because I passed the age. I miss this involvement, this education by watching animated features like other kids. I didn't have that, and now it's like a broken link. I don't see the point why people start singing in the middle of the action.
Well, there is animated features where they not stop talking and start singing in the middle of the action. But this is probably another discussion, and probably will never change your mind on that subject. Regina, I have one last question for you. Our students, they got an exercise. They had to describe their golden future. Can you tell us, how do you foresee your golden future?
Well, what I really would like, I would like to learn how to play electric guitar when I will have more time. And this is a problem about animation, that you let us very few free time. But I hope one day to have, and I wish for my future to have some free time, and I would like to learn to play electric guitar. I already have it. It's on the top of that cabinet there. We don't see it, but it's there. So I'm waiting for the right occasion. And I would like to pass my time reading and painting and gardening, swimming, and playing electric guitar.
That's probably a good life. Regina, thank you so much for this interview. We got a little surprise for you now. We picked a trailer from the history of FMX for you, and it's a trailer called Jazz Orgy by Irina Robina. So have fun now with Jazz Orgy. It's a nice one, isn't it? Regina, it's time to say goodbye. Is there anything you want to pass on to our audience before we go?
Well, I hope this situation will comes with this better, bright future that you are working with your students. I think it will come after this crisis we are living now. I think we can hope that a bit of that. That's what my wish.
Thank you, Regina, and goodbye. Thank you, dear audience, for joining us. If you have any suggestions or comments about the highlights of FMX, just write us to highlights@fmx.de, and we'll do our best to include your feedback in our future program. We'll meet again tomorrow at 6 p.m. Central European Time when Tina Ohnmacht, Head of International Affairs at Filmakademie's Animationsinstitut, is going to interview actor, animation teacher, and our good friend Ed Hooks. So, stay healthy, stay safe. See you again tomorrow, and goodbye.